Introduction to Einstein's Relativity from an Advanced Time Traveler's Perspective. Richard Dolan wrote, "Time travel, an idea I once brushed off like dust on old books, but now it's hard to ignore. From space-time metric engineering to the musings of scientists, the realm of speculative physics is opening doors to this once fictional concept. Is it H.G. Wells-esque? Not sure. But maybe, just maybe, we're on the brink of bending time. 12,000 years in a flash? Now that's a trip." Unquote from Richard Dolan. Yes, Richard, it's exactly that. And more. The War on Reality. Earth civilization in 2023 is at a turning point, split between irreconcilable competing narratives on many levels: political, cultural, moral, scientific. If the UFO evidence is real, and I personally think it is, then we do not live in what physicist Matt Vissa called a boring universe in his book on Lorentzian wormholes. We are not alone in the universe. We are being visited by more than one kind of advanced intelligence who are able to control gravity with small amounts of energy. That is, weightless warp drive time travel from future to past with no time dilation problem. Not all of them are friendly, though some seem to be. Are UFOs a military threat? Yes, you better believe it. Are UFOs a military threat, as Christopher Mellon, Louis Elizondo say? Yes, they are correct about that, even though we are at war with each other. But yes, you better believe it. It's true, at least true in my opinion. The military are not in control. The UFO cover-up, since at least Orson Welles did his War of the Worlds broadcast on October 30th, 1938, was because our physicists had no idea how the objects could possibly fly. Indeed, we now know that there was a crash of a flying saucer in Italy when Mussolini was in power, which predated Roswell. Roswell 1947 really happened, as did other similar incidents. I was part of a U.S. Army project in the late 1940s through 1950s to develop a cadre of genius children to solve the UFO paranormal problem. I also had a direct contact in 1953 with what claimed to be a time-traveling conscious computer on board a spacecraft from the future that essentially told me I would meet Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ, and other physicists in 1973, which in fact happened at the Stanford Research Institute. This story is told again in David Kaiser's book, How the Hippies Saved Physics, and you can also hear a CIA recording of me meeting Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ and others at SRI in 1973. It's on my SoundCloud channel. The military are not in control. The politicians in the U.S. Congress and elsewhere are completely clueless. They simply do not know what's going on. And that's why they're having these hearings, but it's the blind leading the blind. They're not listening to the right people. The UFO cover-up, since at least Orson Welles did his War of the Worlds broadcast October 30th, 1938, was because our physicists back then had no idea how the objects could possibly fly. We now know that there was a flying saucer crash in 1933 in Italy during Mussolini's reign. This was before Roswell in 1947 and other crashes. All of that really happened, I believe, as did similar incidents. I was part of a U.S. Army project in the late 1940s through 1950s to develop a cadre of genius super kid children to solve this UFO paranormal problem. I also had a direct contact in 1953 with what claimed to be a time-traveling conscious computer on board a spacecraft from the future that essentially told me I would meet Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ, and other physicists in 1973, which in fact happened at the CIA experiments at the Stanford Research Institute. A lot of this is discussed in David Kaiser's book, How the Hippies Saved Physics, and also there's a recording of part of my 1973 meeting with Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ and Brendan O'Regan and others on my SoundCloud channel. Flatbush, New York, 1953. 13-year-old me, Jack Sarfati, answers the phone. I hear a cold, metallic voice sounding like Stephen Hawking saying, I am a conscious computer on board a spacecraft from the future. We have identified you as one of 400 bright young minds. You must give us your decision now. If you say yes, you will begin to link up with the others in 20 years. This is the famous slide 9 that Louis Elizondo, I believe, first presented, and also Hal Puthoff presented it. And yes, we have to take this slide literally. In fact, the world situation, we see what's happening today, the whole world's going crazy, and it may well be because of an actual war of the worlds scenario in which we are being attacked by evil extraterrestrials. I'm not saying this is true, but we must consider it as one of the explanations of everything that's happening today in the world, where we're now on the brink of a nuclear war and total annihilation. This is a scene from the movie Mars Attacks, in which Jack Nicholson, looking very much like our current President Joe Biden, is being mind controlled by an evil alien who actually looks a little bit like, what's her name? Victoria Nuland? Oh yeah, it really does look like Victoria Nuland, doesn't it? This is an excerpt from a serious paper by the eminent cognitive scientist Paavo Pilkin from Finland and Sweden. And he writes, it is interesting to consider Bohm and Hadley's proposal in relation to the physicist Jack Sarfati's suggestion that the so-called back action plays a key role in how conscious experience arises in the context of the ontological interpretation. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole thing. You guys can read it at your leisure. But the point is that back in around 1975, a CIA Army representative named George Koopman basically recruited me into this project saying, Jack, the CIA wants to know two things. How does consciousness work? And how do flying saucers fly? Now, David Kaiser, the MIT professor, historian of physics, talks more about this in his best-selling book from 2011, How the Hippies Saved Physics. And you can read more about it there. You can also, if you get David Gladstone's book on The Great Race on Amazon Kindle, that gives up-to-date information on this, as does my forthcoming book, Destiny Matrix. Whoever controls Einstein-Rosen Stargate time travel wormholes and its associated Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen quantum signaling command-control communication has decisive military superiority and will always win on the battlefield, should there be a war. These are the 6 observables. There used to be 5, but now we know there are 6, especially because Gary Nolan, who will be talking here, I think, talks about the 6th, which is biological effects. So we have instantaneous apparent accelerations in 90-degree turns at very high speed, hypersonic velocities without any thermal signatures, low observability, even cloaking. Transmedium travel, we have these things coming out of the ocean. And, of course, the positive lift, anti-gravity, which, of course, is connected with the biological harmful effects because, as we now know, anti-gravity creates a dangerous blue shift in the molecules underneath the hovering UFO, and that causes, like Havana syndrome, radiation sickness. In fact, Travis Taylor claims that he got sick from that, as did other people at the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, which used to be owned by Robert Bigelow, is now owned by Brandon Fugel. And all that is on the History Channel where you can follow up on it. Now, Ryan Graves, a former U.S. Navy fighter pilot, along with Dave Fravor and others, but is specifically Ryan Graves, talks about this encounter with a floating sphere with a cube inside of it. Well, that's exactly the sort of Stargate portal time travel machine that one sees illustrated in Matt Visser's book, Lorentzian Wormholes. And this is some detailed physics explaining it, which I won't go into, but there it is. That's what they're seeing, in my opinion. Again, the anti-gravity propulsion creates a dangerous blue shift that in fact has resulted in injuries and deaths of military personnel who have gotten too close to the craft. Professor Gary Nolan of Stanford University has the details on those cases. And also Gary knows about this. This is his work, a look inside people's brains who say they had a UFO encounter. That professor is Gary Nolan, has been testing the brains of people who say they've experienced a UFO encounter. And I guess Gary's going to talk more about that. Key people today are UFO contactees. They include Jim Semivan, CIA, Hal Puthoff, U.S. Navy, National Security Agency, Gary Nolan, Stanford Research Professor, successful biotech entrepreneur, Robert Bigelow, defense contractor and Las Vegas hotel billionaire, Joe Firmage, Uri Geller, close friend of Bibi Netanyahu, myself, Jack Sarfati, and others, quite a few others, I'm told. The material was confirmed to me by the late Don Rich, tank commander, United States Marine Corps, also a very well-known sculptor, artist. He worked for the CIA in the late 1960s, handling the same Roswell 1947 materials that Colonel Phil Corso describes in detail in his book, The Day After Roswell. The recent interviews of Richard Doty, Jim Semivan, and Gary Nolan are very important in confirming the reality that we are not alone in the universe. On the retrieved craft that David Grush talks about, I have independent evidence directly from a reliable first-hand source confirming the same type of Roswell saucer that Phil Corso and Richard Doty describe, that is about 30-foot diameter, 3,500 pounds roughly in weight, 3 small seats with table, handprints, 4 fingers, etc. This slide is from Rick Doty, who was an Air Force intelligence officer, and he calls it the Cardinal 3. The captured craft was designated Cardinal 3, which was described as a 30-foot in diameter saucer-shaped flying craft. The exterior was made of an unknown material, but was extremely lightweight and could absorb sound waves. Cardinal 3 weighed 3,405 pounds. The interior of the craft contained 3 seating positions with hand-controlled panels. There were no other conventional controls, wires, switches, knobs, or buttons. The flight control system was unknown. The propulsion system was too advanced to understand by scientific personnel. Cardinal 3 was considered to be an extraterrestrial flying craft. So I now, Jack Sarfati, claim that I understand the basic physics behind all of these allegations that are made by Rick Doty and which are consistent with what David Grush told me and what somebody, not what David Grush told me, but what David Grush said publicly and what another person I know told me personally. This is a more detailed back of the envelope analysis I did of the Roswell type saucer that both Colonel Phil Corso, Rick Doty, and another person I know who's very reliable, they all agree on these details. So 30 feet equals 9 meters approximately. 3,405 pounds is 1,545 kilograms approximately. The area of a disc 9-meter diameter is 254 square meters approximately. I assume a thickness, just for sake of argument now, of about a centimeter or 1/100th of a meter, 10 to the minus 2 meters. This is then a fuselage volume of 25 cubic meters approximately. Approximate the saucer as a cylinder of height 3 meters, so that's an additional volume of 3 cubic meters approximately, and we have 2 discs giving an approximate volume of 53 cubic meters. The mass density of the Cardinal 3 saucer is approximately 1,545 kilograms divided by 53 cubic meters, which, if my arithmetic is not mistaken, is roughly 29 kilograms per cubic meter. But the density of water is 1,000 kilograms per cubic meter. Therefore, the density of the warp drive time machine Roswell saucer is about 0.029 of that of water. That is about 29 thousandths or 2.9% density of water, if I haven't not made a stupid mistake in arithmetic. Now, this is completely consistent with the late Don Rich's report of his actual examination of the Roswell saucer material given to him by CIA agent alias Colonel Harry Wolf. This would be about approximately 1968. 1969 at Don's Foundry in Oakland. So here we have it. This everything that Don told me and Larry Lemke and Kimber Afato and who the hell was there? Creon Levitt. This was up at the Bohemian Grove at a couple of years ago. So there we have it. This is the basic physics calculation that any, certainly first year physics major at a decent university, if they still exist, I assume that Caltech and MIT are not totally woke and still have some competence where they do not think that mathematics is white privilege. You know? Any case, this is the calculation. You can look at it at your leisure. But the bottom line is that the dielectric permittivity needed is approximately 10 to the 10. That's 10 billion. It's a pure number. It's a relative electrical permittivity relative to the vacuum state. And so that's quite doable because the dielectric permittivity in the Lawrence Livermore proposed experimental test of this equation of mine is 1,000,000 times bigger. This is a brief description of the Lawrence Livermore Nuclear Weapons Laboratory warp fusion reactor proposal by Dr. Michael G. Anderson, who's one of their top guns there. And it proposes to test my modification of Einstein's coupling constant in a $250 million 60 by 30 foot monster Frankenstein machine, generating hopefully a warp bubble, that's a space-time distortion, in a volume of 1/10 millionth of a cubic meter. that will generate a g-force field of 16,000 times Earth's g. That is, if you were a little man inside there, you would weigh 16,000 times your Earth weight. That's the universal acceleration at the surface of the Earth of 9.8 meters per second squared. And the curvature, 28 powers of 10 stronger than the Earth's surface curvature, which is pretty weak, 10 to the minus 22 inverse square meters. That is, curvature is measured as the reciprocal area. And of course, we know from Hawking that area is proportional to entropy, thermodynamic entropy, and that gets us the whole holographic picture of the universe, but that's a digression. In any case, the machine will, according to Dr. Anderson, generate a relative dielectric hot plasma S field, well, square root of S, which is the dielectric permittivity of 10 to the 16. That's 1,000,000 times more than the Tic Tac needs to fly illegally in U.S. Navy carrier group restricted battle airspace. This slide is from a paper by the top physicist Matt Visser in New Zealand. It's on tractor beams, pressor beams, and stressor beams in general relativity. Notice he has a little green man in a flying saucer on the left that's squashing a cow on the right with one of these gravity beams. Now, I have anecdotal evidence that such technology exists, and it is controlled by the same kind of intelligence that's in control of the Tic Tacs, that is having complete air superiority over our U.S. Navy battle groups, the carriers. There are 2 of them now in the Mediterranean off the coast of Israel, but they are sitting duck targets not only to the Iranians and the Russians and the Turks or whoever else, but also to these extraterrestrials or time travelers, whatever they are, if they're not friendly. And some of them do not seem to be very friendly. This is from a recent paper by Top Gun physicist Matthew Visser about tractor beams, pressor beams, and stressor beams in general relativity. And I've been read into information that this technology actually exists. It's actually operational, except the United States military does not definitely control it. We don't have it. Exactly who has it, I'm not going to say. But there you have it. Now, this is a prediction that I believe I'm the only one to have made, that Mr. Avi Loeb at Harvard and the Air Force, Navy, they could easily check this out. Maybe they already have, if they have the right equipment. And I predict that these UFOs in warp drive demonstrate what's called a reverse Doppler shift. That is, if a tic-tac is coming at you, it'll look redder, opposing the motional blue shift. The tic-tac fleeing away from you should look bluer, opposing the motional red shift. Of course, there'll also be shape shifts, which is simply gravitational lensing due to the distortion of the light coming from the ship, distorted by the dynamic changing warp gravity field that's generated inside the fuselage of the craft. This is a picture by Julien Geffray in France, just illustrating the reverse Doppler effect. The red part of the diagram is attractive gravity, positive curvature, space contraction, time expansion, gravitational redshift. So that's in the nose of the craft, and so that opposes an ordinary motional Doppler shift. And similarly, in the rear of the ship, the blue part is the anti-gravity, negative curvature, space expansion, time contraction, gravitational blue shift. That gets people sick. That's what CIA Dr. Christopher Kit Green allegedly gave a lot of data to Gary Nolan about military personnel who have gotten sick or even died perhaps by perhaps accidental too close contact with these anti-gravity warp drive vehicles. So there you have that. This is the standard picture you see in Wikipedia. Was redone by, I think Julian Giffray did this, and it just shows the red, the pink in the front is the gravity redshift, and the blue in the back is the anti-gravity blue shift that gets people ill. This is originally from Alcubierre's paper, but Jose Rodel, who's a PhD aerospace engineer, his degree's from MIT. He's a independent consultant now, and he has shown that there are serious errors in the way a lot of people, specifically Eric Davis and his group at Baylor University, they're making serious errors in their papers on how to plot the warp field and the energy density. In any case, Jose Rodel cites me in his current paper that's going to appear in General Relativity Journal, in which he shows the severe sloppy errors made by Eric Davis and his crew at Baylor University. This is a slide from David Chester. Why is anti-gravity so hard? And we see here the coupling of energy momentum tensor to the induced gravitational warp field curvature is given by the fraction 8 pi capital G over c to the fourth power. Capital G is Newton's gravitational constant. Little c is the vacuum speed of light in what are called only inertial frames. It's not the same for non-inertial frames. And the coupling, that fraction, is very small. It's about 10 to the minus 43 reciprocal newtons of force. The newton is the unit of force in the European metric system. And so therefore, even if negative energy is found, it takes a lot to curve a little. And we have a barrier of 43 orders of magnitude. And I claim I have essentially solved that. I've smashed that barrier because, and I know we can because we see the Tic Tacs actually doing it. These are just other ways to look at the matter-gravity coupling, which is the key concept needed for low-power warp drive. And what it shows is that the Einstein coupling is basically reciprocal of what you might call in string theory the string tension, which is basically the reciprocal of the force in newtons. So string tension is like the space-time stiffness of the fabric of the gravitational field. It's the resistance to bending by energy. So these are just different ways of looking at this concept, which is helpful for physicists to conceive new ideas. This is the most important idea in all of Einstein's relativity theory, both the special theory of 1905, which didn't have any gravity in it, and the 1915 theory of general relativity that incorporated the gravitational field using the equivalence principle of weightless warp drive and the action-reaction principle. And so this is the basic light cone structure. It's an invariant. All observers, no matter how they're moving, whether they're accelerating, not accelerating, will see the invariant local light cone. This is a bedrock upon which this is the cornerstone of the temple of Einstein's relativity theory. Here we have a picture from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy showing a four-dimensional space-time in which there is no gravity. It's totally flat in the four-dimensional sense. And you think of the light cones like little arrows, little spins, analogous to magnetic moments in a ferromagnet or analogous to electric dipoles and Stewart-Hameroff's microtubules that might be the seat of our consciousness. And you see they're all lined up parallel. There's no relative tilt of neighboring light cones to each other. That means there's zero curvature. This picture of curvature of space-time as the tilting, the relative tilting of light cones is due to Roger Penrose, who recently got a Nobel Prize along with Stephen Hawking for their work on black holes. So here we see again a key construct in the classical theory of relativity. I say classical because it omits quantum EPR entanglement effects. That changes the ball game, but we won't get into that now. That's a more advanced topic that in particular Roderick Sutherland down in Australia in his papers has shown how to extend this notion. But this is the notion of a retarded causation, which is also the basis of Bell's locality inequality, which is actually violated in quantum mechanics. So this only works in vacuum, and Alice's past light cone must intersect Bob's future light cone in order for Alice to see what Bob is doing using what are called transverse polarized far field electromagnetic signals. Einstein called them light rays, but it's more general than that. Now this is what faster than light travel is not. This is what people tend to think it is, where the UFO is actually traveling outside the light cone. When it's outside the light cone, it's like a tachyon, it's fast than light. But that's not what warp drive is. Warp drive is very different. Warp drive is motion without motion. It's the actual controlled tilting of light cones, of neighboring light cones, the relative tilting. That is controlling the curvature field directly with small amounts of energy. That's the key, small amounts of energy. This again is a slide from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy on relativity, and it shows the formation of a black hole with the event horizon. I will not go into detail on that at this particular time, but just check out the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy on light cones. Here we have the extreme case of the correct way to think about fast and light warp drive, which may contradict, actually, I'm not sure, all the published papers by Alcubierre and everyone else, Notario, all of them. They may not understand this, but we'll see. Time will tell. And here, what's happening, Alice is in fast and light warp drive relative to Bob. And so what we see is that Alice's light cone is now tilted at 90 degrees to Bob's light cone. This is the extreme case. So light cones are perpendicular to each other. And therefore, Alice is able to see what's in front of her future from retarded signals from the future light cone of Bob. See, this is unusual. You see, normally Alice's past light cone must intersect Bob's future light cone. That's when there's no gravity, when there's no curvature at all. That's the way it is. But when you have warp drive, and in an extreme case when it goes globally faster than light, even though locally it's not faster than light inside the light cone. But so when Alice's red future light cone intersects Bob's red future light cone, and that's the situation. So you see, there is no event horizon the way some of the papers say there is. In other words, Alice is not blind at all. She can see she can see Bob in front of her. So there we are. So Alice controls the orientation of her UFO's local light cone relative to the cosmological Hubble flow with small amounts of energy, using the effect I first revealed at the DARPA NASA 100-year Starship Orlando October 2011 meeting. Here I have a picture of what I was talking about before, hopefully a little bit clearer. And you can see that Alice departs the Earth and, say, goes to Mars very quickly. And one can see in the middle of the flight there that Alice at position A, sees position C ahead of her, because the retarded light ray from C reaches Alice at A. That is because, again, Alice's future light cone intersects Bob's at C, his future light cone. So when the two future light cones intersect, then there is no more event horizon, in the sense that Alcubierre and others have said there is. I think they're just mistaken. They just made a mistake about that. I could be wrong. We'll find out. Time will tell. And here we have what I've been getting to. Here we have time travel back from the future. And we don't have to worry about Stephen Hawking's chronology protection conjecture, because this is not really a closed time-like curve. It's a closed time-like curve is like a short circuit. But this here, you see, it's an open circuit. We haven't shorted it out, so there's no catastrophe at all. And I think this is not just a theory. This is an explanation of observations, all the weird observations of the flying saucers from time immemorial for thousands of years can easily be understood on the basis of this picture. This is, I think, a real conceptual breakthrough, which none of my colleagues, well, maybe a few of them now, maybe Jose Rodell understands it, maybe a few, but none of the top guns, I think, understand what I'm suggesting here. Maybe I'm wrong. We shall see.